I have never felt this for anybody in my life. I didn't even know I could. And then you walk in, and from that first moment that I saw you...
It really looks like Virgin River Season 7 is gearing up to give us some big questions, and fans are already buzzing about two in particular. One is why Cameron Hayek won't be back as a regular character, and the other is what's really going on with Charmaine and that dark twist that could completely change Mel's story. So, let's unpack everything we know and what it might mean for the future of the show, because this Netflix hit has been around long enough to keep surprising us. Now, Cameron Hayek, played by Mark Ganime, has been a part of the Virgin River world for the past 2 seasons, but he's officially not returning in Season 7. That leaves a bunch of fans wondering why. This show has managed to pull in such a passionate audience that it's now Netflix's longest-running scripted series. Over its 6 seasons, we've seen plenty of characters come and go, but Cameron turned out to be one of the more divisive ones. He first arrived in Season 4, brought in by Doc Mullins to help out at the medical practice. Right away, he caused drama by poking his nose into Mel's personal life, especially when it came to her romance with Jack. Instead of handling it gracefully, he quit with a 2-week notice, which rubbed people the wrong way. But Cameron didn't stay stuck in that unlikable lane forever. As time went on, he developed into a more layered character, especially when he started a romance with Muriel. Fans who warmed up to him probably hoped to see more, but unfortunately, his arc has wrapped up. Season 6 made it clear that his story had already reached its natural ending. When we look back, it actually makes sense. By the end of Season 5 Part 2 and into Season 6, Cameron had broken things off with Muriel because he wanted to reunite with his ex-fiancée. The decision seemed tied to his desire to have children, which Muriel wasn't on board with. That became even more obvious in the holiday episodes when Muriel directly asked him to think seriously about what he wanted in life. So while it might sting for fans, the writing was already on the wall. Cameron only popped back up briefly in Season 6, mainly for Jack and Mel's wedding. By then, the love triangle drama that started when he arrived had already fizzled out, since Mel was officially married. His scenes with Muriel were more about tying up loose ends. They both seemed content with their choices, and Muriel even moved on romantically. That gave the closure they needed, so there wasn't much left to explore. On top of that, Doc now has his vision back after the clinical trial, which was the original reason Cameron came to town. So unless something drastic happens, there's really no reason for him to return to the practice. Doc isn't the type to ask for extra help unless it's absolutely necessary, but because of all this, Cameron's absence in Season 7 makes sense. His biggest storylines have already been resolved, but just because his story wrapped doesn't mean his absence won't have ripple effects. Muriel, for instance, won't have to deal with bumping into her ex every day, which could let her focus fully on her new romance. She's also dealing with her cancer diagnosis, so instead of leaning on a romantic partner, she might rely more on her friends in town. That could actually deepen her ties with the community in ways we haven't seen before. Cameron leaving also leaves the Mullins clinic in a tricky spot. Doc's license is still suspended, and California law doesn't yet allow nurse practitioners like Mel to work independently without a supervising doctor. That means the clinic is vulnerable, especially with a big hospital trying to expand into Virgin River. Mel and Jack are planning to adopt a child, so Mel could take some time off, even though she's unlikely to quit nursing altogether. But without Cameron there, the clinic could be really short-staffed, which raises the stakes for Doc's fight to keep it running. Now, if we look at Cameron's character compared to the Virgin River books by Robyn Carr, it's interesting how different they are. On the page, Cameron Michaels shows up after Doc dies and ends up taking over his practice. He also has a fling with a woman named Abby, which results in her having twins. That storyline has basically nothing to do with what we've seen in the show. The only similarity is that both versions of Cameron are doctors at Doc's clinic. So really, the Netflix adaptation has completely reimagined his character. Because of that, there's always the possibility the writers could pull more from the source material if they wanted to bring him back later. For example, if the show makes it to Season 8 or beyond, they could reintroduce Cameron with a new storyline. Maybe he could even father twins like in the books, which would tie into his original arc. But the problem is, that might feel too repetitive after everything that happened with Charmaine's pregnancy storyline. Plus, since many viewers already thought Cameron came off as a little creepy, it might not be the warmest welcome. Another possible path would be tied to Doc's health. In the books, Cameron comes after Doc has died, but in the show, Doc is alive and still fighting to stay in practice. If the writers decided to play with that, they could eventually have Doc lose his eyesight for good and bring Cameron back to step in at the clinic. That would make sense in terms of continuity, but again, not everyone would be thrilled to see him again. And that brings us to the other big mystery hanging over Season 7, Charmaine. She's been part of this show since the beginning, going from Jack's lover to his enemy and eventually to someone who found a middle ground with him and Mel. In Season 6, we saw Jack help her file a restraining order against Calvin, the father of her twins, and she even offered to do Mel's hair for the wedding. But then she didn't show up. Jack went to check on her, and whatever he found clearly shook him, which is saying something, since Jack is usually unflappable. This cliffhanger has sparked all kinds of theories. The darkest one, which fans on Reddit have been tossing around, is that Charmaine is dead. The theory goes that Calvin killed her after she tried to cut him off with the restraining order. If that's true, then Calvin would end up in jail, and Mel and Jack could wind up raising her twins. It's a grim possibility, but it also ties into Mel's long-running storyline about her desire to be a mother. If Mel and Jack were to take in the twins, it would mean her infertility journey, which has been such a huge part of her arc, would take a new turn. She lost her baby in Season 5, and she and Jack went back and forth about whether to keep trying. Ultimately, they decided adoption was the right path for them. Taking in Charmaine's twins would give them the family they've always wanted and bring that chapter of Mel's story to a close. But there's a complication. The Season 6 finale also set up a completely different adoption storyline. One of Mel's patients, a young woman, was planning to give her baby to another couple in town. At the last minute, that couple backed out, and the woman turned to Mel and Jack instead. That sets up a very likely path where Mel and Jack adopt her baby. If that happens, it's hard to imagine them also taking on Charmaine's twins. Raising 3 newborns at once would be overwhelming, even for them. Showrunner Patrick Sean Smith has even hinted in interviews that this patient storyline is the one the show plans to follow, because he wants to explore the complexities of adoption and make it feel real rather than like a simple transaction. So while the Charmaine theory is juicy, it doesn't seem like the most likely outcome. Charmaine's death seems unlikely since it doesn't happen in the books, and such a dark twist would clash with Virgin River's usual tone. More likely, she'll survive to raise her twins, though her fate remains uncertain. Season 7 promises plenty of drama with Cameron's departure, Muriel's health struggles, Doc's battle to save his clinic, and Mel and Jack's adoption journey. Even without Cameron as a regular, his absence may still influence events. Ultimately, Virgin River thrives on how its interconnected characters shape one another's lives, ensuring Charmaine and others remain central to the unfolding storylines in meaningful ways. And that's that for today's video. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay in the loop. And if you want, you can share your thoughts about this video in the comments.